Hey there, you're listening to the EmpowerTech podcast with Ijari Savalos. This podcast is where we discuss all things tech and explore the growing ways in how we can leverage technology to lead smart, sustainable, and impactful lives.
On this episode, we talk to Kylee Ingram. She is foremost a creator, a storyteller, technologist, and entrepreneur who has spent her career blending creativity with innovation. Her interactive work has been used by some of the world's largest brands and recognised at South by Southwest, Cannes Content 360 and the Sports Technology Awards. She served 2 Entrepreneur in Residence positions, taught entrepreneurship through Screen Producers Australia and AFTRS, and advised across creative tech and impact sectors. As co-founder and CEO of Wizer, we talked to Kylee about her decision intelligence platform that helps organisations identify the right voices, map cognitive strengths, and build smarter, more inclusive decision panels. Let's get started.
Kylee, so great to have you here today.
Thank you very much for having me.
I would really like to start with your journey. Can you tell us about your journey to creating Wizer?
Yeah, I guess at heart, I'm a creator. I started out in television and I was lucky. One of my first jobs was in sports TV, and I love sport. So I was lucky and did things like, was on the Soccer World Cup at one point when I was very young, and there were about, 200 producers for the host broadcaster, and I was one of 2.
Wow.
2 out of 200 women. Everybody else there were 2 women and the rest were, men. So I started there, and then at some point I'd done the Surf World Tour. I'd done all these things. It was super exciting, but I think I had my midlife crisis early and thought, gosh, I'm making stuff for people that are lying on the couch Saturday morning. I wanted to do a little bit more than that and saw the power of TV. So I went back and did my master's in sustainable development, and then I thought I wanted to do sustainability issues, and then went and started Australian documentaries. And long story, I took on a business partner in that, and we started doing broadcast again for the ABC. I did a lot initially with not-for-profits. And we're chugging along. We're doing, different things for different broadcasters. And at some point, Screen Australia offers a grant for producers to, move out of just doing TV. What was this interactive space? And it's been through all types of things, interactive, third screen, this, that. And they offered a grant for that. And I think in the middle of the night, I woke up and had this idea for this game where kids could adopt an animal and keep it alive by decreasing their, water, land and carbon consumption. And that got nominated at Cannes Interactive, and then I did another one the following year about, enthusiastic consent, and that got nominated again, and I started to think, maybe I'm better at this than I am at TV. But TV also takes a really long time, and you've got to bet, you bet on yourself, and in Australia in particular, you don't get your money back on your development costs.
Okay. And how long does a piece of work that you're doing for TV take?
Years.
Oh, really? Yeah, that is a long time.
Yeah, I think some things are quick. Maybe I'm just looking downstairs at the mushroom lady. That they would turn around things like that quickly, topical things. And I think it depends. I think is the word. Okay, I've got one documentary I'm still working on that is years in the making. So from there I started to make a whole lot of different things. And when I left that business, I ended up over in the US, and I was in Boulder, Colorado, and I kind of came across these accelerators. And I sat in one for 2 years. Long story, we don't need to go in here. And I thought, oh, my gosh, there's a process to how you get your product up, you need to do all this. And so I started to be a little bit more, let's try things. And I got asked by my co-founder with Wizer. He just finished his research in wise crowds. So the idea that a crowd comes together and makes a better decision than the individual, even if they're an expert. And I had done a project called Crowd TV where we came together and we made a documentary together. And it was so much fun. But I think when you go and build a business around these things, just getting the proof of concept is nothing compared to building the business. You know, you get
proof of concept is the fun part, and then there's the hard slog. So,
yes.
So it sounds like you did kind of a few putting together tech kind of projects before you found your co-founder, and you mentioned the accelerator. For those that don't know what an accelerator is, can you give us a quick rundown of what one is?
Yeah, accelerators, all sorts of things have come out of accelerators like Airbnb and all the, things. And an accelerator is just what it means. It accelerates your company, startups. They're looking for startups, not looking for hairdressing businesses or bakeries. They're looking for things that can scale and preferably globally. And there's accelerators everywhere. And some things call themselves accelerators. And I think it's dubious. They're incubators. So we're getting into all this startup lingo, but an accelerator generally will last about 3 months.
Okay.
And they put the startups in a program. They'll often give them a little bit of seed funding, but they'll often take equity for that. So it might be, they might try and take, I don't know, somewhere between 5 and 10%.
Okay.
Give you whatever it is.
And seed funding, for those that don't know the lingo, that's the first bit of funding that a startup gets. Is that why they call it seed?
Well, yes, but you could have got funding before that from your friends, family, and fools, as they call the very first round.
All the fools you could convince.
Yes, all your friendly fools, bless them.
Okay.
So yeah, the seed funding, and they often want to get you early so they can
get in on your idea early.
Yeah, and I guess people would be used to that concept watching Shark Tank.
Okay.
But Shark Tank, sitting in this accelerator in Colorado, they tell the teams to go on it but never take the deal kind of thing, because you wouldn't want to really be giving away 30% of your equity for $30,000 or something like, you know what I mean? There's some wild deals they throw around, and I don't necessarily think it's a good way of learning about, how you should structure your cap table or anything like that. But now we're getting deeper into the lingo.
So you mentioned that you were there for a couple of years, and that gave you a sense of what was required to take a product from idea through to a business.
Yeah, and I think I've always been tinkering. I tried to turn Habitat, the game that first got me going. I trying to turn that into the mascot app. So I was always tinkering on the side with what I was doing. And at the same time, Red Bull Austria rang and said, "Hey, we've heard about your interactive stuff. What would you pitch to us? We're becoming a TV show, but want to do interactive things." So there were all these just little markers that gave me ideas about going into it. And it's, while I was sitting in Colorado, I was trying to get a show up about these accelerators, and Obama had just changed the law that you could equity invest in companies. And I was like, oh, that'd be cool. You watch this and you learn about it, and then you could go and throw in your whatever at the end. I was going to limit it so we didn't take grandma and grandpa's money for things that were on TV. But I think I like the concept of things being more than passive. How do you get people off the couch? How do you get people, and it has to be more than clicktivism. You don't just want to get people to click to say they agree with something. Like I don't know. I'm intrigued by that movement of people. How do you get them doing things?
That cool. How do you convert, I guess, something that can have an impact to action?
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
You can watch the dolphins being slaughtered, but then what do you do? Like, often you're watching the documentary just crying on the couch.
Oh, despair. And so what does Wizer actually do?
Yes, well, I think we always need to start with the why, isn't it? That's what we learn in these things. And I think the why, at the heart of Wizer, it's trying to help people make better decisions. But I think if you unpack that, what we're trying to address is the structural problems that distort how decisions are made. And the first thing I'd say to that is there's bias. Too often, too few people are making these decisions. And, once they're in the room making the decisions, they tend to replicate themselves. And it's not malicious, it's human bias. And people trust people that think like us. And we can come back to some of this research because it's super interesting. Well, I think it is. And that research is clear. If you don't have that cognitive diversity, your decisions are narrower, your blind spots grow, and your opportunities are missed. But that doesn't stop people from doing that. And then the second thing I like to talk about, I don't know whether you've come across this, is conflict entrepreneurs.
I've not heard of that term before. Tell me more.
Looking at society, social platforms, they're some of the largest and most powerful companies in the world, and they make money by keeping us apart. They keep us in echo chambers, they keep us yelling at one another, and their whole model for making money is driven around this, and it tears at the fabric of society.
Yes.
And so if you want to run a company, you have to do the opposite of that. If you start to allow your staff being like that, you end up in silos. You're not going to be able to identify talent, and you will have toxic culture. And so I think the way we've designed Wizer is to try and combat those problems that create that poorer decision. And then we get to the, mission statement of, or the, values-driven approach of, we want to help people make better decisions.
Okay.
Because I think it helps everybody.
Yes. Yeah, that sounds like a really valuable tool. And just something that you've piqued my interest in, something that you said right at the beginning there, that you said we often pick ourselves in the room. Can you give us an example of what you mean there?
Yeah, so once my co-founder was talking about wise crowds, that can be quite nebulous and difficult to understand, difficult to pinpoint. And we came across at the same time my friend at Deloitte told me about this other person at Deloitte's research, Dr. Juliet Burke, and she wrote a book that they use at the AICD called Which Two Heads Are Better Than One? And she looked at the 6 frameworks of decision-making and what causes problems in companies. And she found if you have, a leader that's open to inclusion and these 6 frameworks, you can reduce your decision errors by 30%. And part of that, huge part of that is cognitive drift. So if you think about what we know, what we need for a good decision is you need people, 6, 7, probably 7 or more. So you've got all the 7 archetypes in there, the cognitive archetypes. You need that diversity of age, gender, and ethnicity, and you also need experience. So I am coming to answer your question, but when we're looking at the cognitive diversity, which is the way you're coming at decisions, Juliet found there were 6. We added a 7th just to be we did the research. We took her research and we spent 2 years looking at decision. It took us 2 years to build out these profiles.
Yeah, wow.
But what she said in her research was you get this cognitive drift, and when you have young teams or teams that first starting out, you might have the full spectrum of that cognitive diversity. You might not if you're in a law firm because there's a very homogenized way of thinking. So there's different things, but you will have the full spectrum. And what we find in Western society is the top of the tree are 2 types of decision makers, mostly what you'd call achievers. So they're very results-driven people. These achievers then want to pick. They like working with one another, they want to pick one another, and they see their success and think that you should think like that. So then down here, people start to go, I should probably adjust the way I'm doing things, or these people have picked themselves and moved them up.
Yes. Okay, yes. I understand how that might play out in an interview where you want to add someone to the team and you might be interviewing someone that sounds a lot like you, and therefore you're like, you're just like one of us. You'd be perfect.
Exactly.
Yes. So I can see how that might happen.
And it happens all the way to by the time you get to middle management. If you read Juliet's book, you're really, really beginning to lose it and start to go up to the peak.
Okay.
So that's kind of, if you don't know you've got it, you can't protect it from being lost.
Yes. So the tool that you have is based on I guess this research, which is great to hear, that it's not just something that's been made up for the sake of selling a tool. How are you seeing it impact clients that decide to use it?
Yeah, I mean, we've ended up, we barely talk about wise crowds anymore, although we believe that humans are made to make decisions together. But there's a few ways it's being used, and I think maybe the most interesting for us is that internal team use, because it's being used by stakeholders. And I wouldn't mind telling you a funny story about a new tool we popped up recently. Because we were told no, and I was like, oh, that's fun. So if we look at internal teams, I think, well, a lot of teams, you're having this cognitive diversity problem that you might not even know. People don't realise they're being biased. They don't, realise all different things. So how can you help a CEO insource that decision? Like, do they actually know what people they have within their organisation? Do they understand, where they should be placed in a decision? So we've built a tool where we can help people understand who should be in the room for each decision, giving them, a science metric. And the metric is looking at those different diversities and that experience I said before. And it'll give you a process that goes from a red light to a green light. So if there's two people in the room, which often happens, they're like, I can make this decision. It'll say to them, look, you've got a bit of a red light here. Why don't you go, have you met, this person? So it makes recommendations and it'll let them know live what they're missing. So it might say to them, hey, you've got no women in the room and everybody's over 65. Is that a problem? If you're doing stakeholder engagement, it might not be a problem. Yeah. But you should probably know that before you go in. And what we see is people self-correcting.
Yes.
And one of the really interesting stats is, and, we're still early days, but 40 to 60% of the people that are being recommended by Wizer haven't been tapped before.
Okay.
So that's a huge number of people, and it's potential talent that's sitting left on the table, because often what happens is the squeakiest wheel always shows up, or they're seen as the expert, or they think this person should be on the leadership track. It's unearthing people for organisations. And so we've got this process that I think we have got 3 points of difference from anything else that's out there. We've got the decision profiles, and they're not a static assessment. They go in, you do your profile. They might say, Yari, you're an analyzer, you're really good at this. So everybody learns about themselves when they come to a decision. And then it might say, so you go in and you're going to make a decision. It then has the panel strength, which will say red to green, whether or not you got the right panel, and then that recommendation engine. So all of those together give you a green light process. And I think it's helping you insource, it's helping you find people, but that process is important for CEOs too, isn't it? Yes. To say to the board, here we have a process. We were able to use our own people. We didn't have to go to a huge external consultant. And we probably made the best decision we can based on the people we have. And those people all of a sudden feel included. They don't feel as siloed. So they're the kind of and culture changes.
Yes. Yeah, I can see how slowly that would start to chip away at behaviours and the culture in terms of people thinking a little bit differently when they come in to make decisions that are important for the business.
Yeah, and it replaces very static frameworks that you sometimes have to take months to build, and then you got to onboard everybody. It almost gives people mindfulness around a decision immediately.
Yes.
With Boeing, it would tell them that there's no longer engineers in the room, and perhaps they should put some back in. Put those doors back on the planes, I suspect is what it might say.
Yes. Well-meaning people.
Yes.
is what comes to mind when you give that sort of example. And so you mentioned something about building on your tool. How do you leverage? Do you leverage AI for your business now?
we always thought we'd turn on AI well before. We have AI in the insights, and we always thought we'd turn AI on earlier to find the people. Early on in the piece, the investment we did take, some of the investors were like, you should go into AI-assisted decision-making. And I was like, everybody's going to do that. Like, I just sounded dull. Like, I think we should always be comparing about what AI would say, but I always think maybe it's because I come from the arts. Humans have this beautiful ability to predict, imagine a future. The AI isn't thinking. It's going back on what we've done to predict what can be. Mm-hmm. Whereas humans have creativity. They have nuance. There's all this stuff. Why not ask people and at some point let the AI sort those people? We haven't turned that on. We have turned on the insights for, it might say to you as an organization, hey, you've got... Well, I know for Wizer, we've got a whole lot of collaborators and no analyzers at the moment or something, and say, hey, you're going to struggle with these kind of decisions. Or so it'll kind of tell you live what's going on within your company or within your groups, or marketing's or collaborators. You need to, you should be thinking about pulling this person in. So it gives you the insight around that where the siloing might be happening a lot.
Okay. And in terms of any new, so you've started with, I guess, a core to the tool. Is there anything that you've added on along the way?
Well, we changed a lot along the way. I think, what do they say? Something about those that can pivot fastest win. I don't know whether I'm going to win, but I'll let you know. But we've been open to pivoting. Because we started at both ends. We started with an app. Crazy idea, but we had a nice partnership with a big publisher. And so we tried that, but it seemed too superficial. And then at the other end, the first pilot we did was the Sydney Children's Hospital Foundation, where we tripled the amount of money we raised for paediatric research. But that was so much consulting, we came back to the middle and said, what can we scale, which is what we've got here. And then I think we've gone from wise crowds to the flywheel being these decision profiles and what we can pull off that. And, it would have been a month ago now, a foundation came to me and said, hey, could we use the decision profiles to work out how we should be communicating to people? And I said, we should be doing that. How else do you decide? And they're like, oh, it's highly personalized. I said, but what are you personalizing? So they're like, they might be saying, oh, hi, how's your cat and your dog and your children and whatever, but that's not how you make a decision when you're giving money. And it was funny because the chair found out about it and said, oh, I want that tool. And I went into the room with the people that run it, and they were just like, how did you get in this? Or, when you can feel somebody feels like a friend has put you in the room?
Yes.
They were just like, how are you here? And I was like... And I was trying to be a problem solver. I was like, we could do this, we'd do that. And I actually went back to Juliet because they were like, no, there's no way we can't ask our donors to do this decision profile. And it's fantastic that they were so negative, because if they weren't, I might have thought the solution could work for them. If a little bit of hope goes a long way. They gave me no hope, which was fantastic. And I went back to Julia and I said, what would we need to do speculative profiles? And she, we realized we could do it. And rather than bother my development team now with AI, I can get an awful long way developing.
Wow.
And so I built out a tool that it can, you put in what you know about a person. So you might say Jason Bourne is a security expert. He worries about people's lives. You can see long-term problems. And it'll come out with a probability. Look, Jason, it come out with a high probability for him that he's a guardian. He's a likely guardian. And then you can put your comms in. So I took 20, I've got the theatre companies, I've got children's charities, and I put the comms in, and it'll say, look, you're writing this way. If you're a guardian, you're going to want to know this, this, and this. So it kind of means that people need 7 different templates, not 20. Mm-hmm. And then I launched that. I needed a little bit of help in the end, I will admit, with the email to generate. But I sent that out to, 100 friends and just said, please try this. They're all sick of me by now and all they're trying. But There's usually enough that will give it a go.
Well, and you need those friends to test on. Yes.
So they're so. I've even said with some of my friends, when you give their birthday to, I say thank you for continuing to open my emails and test things. I think it's a true test of friendship. They must be rolling their eyes, but. We got 1,000 uses in 48 hours. Okay. So then I knew, okay, let's send this to the dev team and put it up properly. Mm. And so that's just one of those things, I think you've got to be really, the more nimble you can be and go, oh, well, that's an opportunity.
Mm-hmm. To test it out and build something you can test. Yes. Yeah. And I assume when we didn't have as many tools as we have now in terms of the AI kind of tools that we're seeing on the market that you can leverage, that would have been harder to build, to test, more time consuming, I assume.
Oh, I couldn't have done it. And over the years, I've had all sorts of ideas. Living up in Byron Bay, I, got some guys to make me Potholes in Paradise app. You could mark a pothole and go, oh, it's huge. And then I wanted to send the data to the council to say, this is how long it's been live for. And I was playing around the other weekend. I can pretty much make that. I've rebuilt it, but I could never have done it without AI. Yeah. So I feel much more liberated because other people in their downtime probably do normal things. I'll go, oh, I could make this.
I like the sound of the pothole app. That sounds very practical.
Oh, I've got other things for you too. Yes.
You'll have to tell me about the pothole app on another day.
Yes,
but
exactly.
That sounds, so I'm in Brisbane and that sounds very relevant here when it starts raining in terms of citizens getting off the couch, as you said before. I'm really interested in any other challenges that you haven't already mentioned that you've had in this journey in terms of Wizer and continuing that journey as a business.
A lot. We took some money early on and then, I think there was that beautiful Forbes article about women raising money, and at early stage startups, we are 0.7% of the money that gets,
Yes.
And it, and I've been in that, I started in sports TV. I've been in rooms being the only woman my whole career, but this was different. This is something different where they would turn to my business. It was just all that weird stuff you hear, And in the end, I said to my board, let's just make this a business that works because people buy it, or it doesn't because I feel like it's going to damage my soul, who I am. It's going to make me so sad. I can't do it. It just made me, but it made me more determined. So that's hard because we bootstrapped and we find ourselves. But at the same time, sometimes I think, gosh, would we have done, I feel like we would have gone down sniffing at things. Well, we probably would have kept that other thing open that I was saying, the consulting piece that more than what, the Sydney Children's Hospital and ANU. We had some big clients there, and to shut that off because we could see how hard it was going to be in the future, you might have just gone after it because you had the money. Whereas I think we've been very, very focused at what we're doing. I think when people say, I'm left with the impression, and also, I've sat in accelerators for more than those 2 years too. I'm lucky enough that I've had a job in the US too while I've been building this, which is in another accelerator. But I think what you see is people can't last to get that product market fit, or the money makes them think they've got the product market fit. Whereas as painful as it is, it's really, really hard. And when you've finally built something, the thought of doing sales as well, I think a lot of us think, I'm no good at sales. I don't want to do that. And I think the only superpower I have is getting up every day and taking another step. And I often think I'm bad at this. I'm no good at this. I wish somebody was doing this, but I'm the only one here. So just, I've got a good team around me to do some things, but we still don't have
get out there.
We still don't have all the sales support we need, or I find myself doing marketing things, or, after we get off this call, who knows what I'll be head of for the other. But,
so there are pros and cons, right? So you mentioned the challenge of not necessarily getting the funding at the beginning, but if you had, you might not have the product that you have now, nor the flexibility to kind of pivot a little bit, because I'm assuming that with the funding would have come conditions for staying on a certain track, right?
Yes, and that, the investors get a little bit more vocal about what they want and things, whereas they've really had to trust us when we send out, we send out what we're doing. And I've watched them get more and more on board. Like, I used to get more emails going, why aren't you doing this or that? Whereas I think now they're like, oh, wow, like... And the clients take, you think you're going to do something in a month. It can, with the stakeholder engagement piece, we've been working with some clients for a year now, and they're finally, it's finally moving. But it was a big piece for them. You have to help them. We're building something that does not exist.
Yes.
So you can't say we're a CRM that's like another CRM, but we're better. Whereas we're building something that requires a huge knowledge piece with it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And it's easier for people to say no, isn't it, to that?
Yes, it's easier for a client to go, oh, you're like this. Okay, I know where I am with this product. When it's something completely new, it's very different. I imagine there's a lot more relationship building that's required, more effort that goes into that before you actually can get them across the line with an actual sale.
Yeah, 100%. And it's that knowledge building. You got to put, you've got to create content all the time. You just got to keep talking every day. I feel like I can update my website at least twice a week with the new way we're thinking about things. We do try and remain, it's just wild how fast things move how fast we get to move with it.
Any other surprises, Kylee, that you've had along the way on this particular journey?
Oh, I just think it's surprising how long it takes.
Okay.
I think because with television, I think that one thing television does give to you is rejection is like water off the duck's back. Like whatever. You got to have a huge slate. You get rejected all the time. So rejection is, I think, being good at rejection. Mm-hmm. I suspect I'm very good at that. I'm like, oh, well, okay, not for them. You go where you're wanted or who you can work with. And the other thing I've just spent a lot of time doing is a partnership program. Like, how do you get that process up? Because I'm not necessarily the most process-orientated person. I like the idea of building a company where when you are getting a client on board, you're doing something together that will build value for both of you. Mm-hmm. And that takes longer. But that means that you end up with somebody that's a lot more into what you're doing than
invested.
Well, they're so invested by the time you're crossing the line, a year later or whatever. You're both in it together and you've built something that can create almost more value for them to some degree if you're in monetary terms than us.
Yeah, yeah. Any pleasant surprises?
I'm surprised how much I'm into the research and I'm surprised. I think, I'm used to it where you get some money to make something like a TV show or a website or something and you're done. Whereas the beauty of building a business, there's something really beautiful about that, and there's something beautiful about what we're doing. Like, that you're not getting into, I like that we're not getting into arguments with people about stuff that should be obvious, that there's no women in the room or there's no one under 50 or,
and they're turning around going, oh, yeah.
It's not us having the argument, though. Like, we built something that's it just goes, here's the science.
Yes.
Do you want the science or don't you?
Yeah.
So
do you want to
that's a really pleasant surprise when you build something. Oh, and the other thing is when it's used in a completely different way. Like stakeholder engagement, we never built it for that, and they're the ones that are running at it.
Yes. So,
that's always... And then the fundraising thing I was telling you the other day, that was so much fun. Whether it'd be worth it, but it was so much fun.
Wonderful. That sounds like a really interesting journey you're still on. And before we wrap up, I do wanted to ask, if there are listeners out there really excited about doing something similar, or running a completely different type of business with tech, without tech, what would be your top tips for our listeners to empower themselves in this space?
When I was talking about accelerators, there's all this stuff that's out there. It's free online. I think Stanford did most of it. You know, you can go and look. It's called the lean startup model, you know. Just be honest with yourself. Go and, you know, what they say is customer discovery, customer discovery. Just go and have as many conversations as you can with people and be curious. Never, ever be defensive. I think being defensive just gets doors shut in your face. If you can be curious and open to whatever people want to say to you, and don't take it to heart, you know. You could be the right one, but also listen where you need to, I think, is it. But there's all this stuff online that is free and accessible. And there's also, you know, you could kind of do courses. When I first came back to Australia, I ran an ideation course up at the university here when I was entrepreneur in residence. And it was just so much fun having people in the room. And I can see it's stuff that they've never thought about. And I think you've just got to be vulnerable, open, but there's a process that you can go through that will get you there so much faster than you using your gut to gut test everything. Like, you know, use what's out there and all those free tools to get it done. And then if you don't have the network or you don't have the ability, go and apply for the accelerators. Australia has a lot of its own, and they're often siloed in different ways depending on what you're looking at, whether it's sport tech or fintech or tech.
Yeah. And I've just sort of there's also, I've seen, I guess, groups that get together to network, which are totally free most of the time, especially in the startup land. So if you don't know where to start, you can always attend those sorts of things. I think some of them are on meetups. Some of them you can get access to through things like your local business hub advertises stuff like that. And some of the government sites also advertise things like that. So if you really are sort of scratching around and maybe are overwhelmed by all the things that are available, you know, going to those things and having conversations and asking questions is also a good place to go.
100%. And, you know, they're everywhere. And I even see over the years how much it's come along in Byron. And remember, I think a lot of people that are starting out, they get very worried. Oh, my idea, I can't keep my idea.
Got to keep it a secret. Can't tell anyone.
Yeah, and you'll never test it that way. Like, what are the chances of somebody stealing what you're doing? Maybe, I don't know. But
it's pretty slim. It's
very slim. And the other thing I'd say, which I didn't realize at the start, is if you do go to those things, the one thing I would say is that at some point, if you are going to do it, you need to go and ask as many people how to build it. Don't stop at the first person, because they always say, you build this in HTML5. And you'll go, what do you do? I do HTML5. I do this. So you won't understand any of the codes, but make sure you get a lot of data points. The more conversations you have, because you want to know how best to build it and best to carry forward, because every developer will tell you the code that they're writing is the best code to build it on.
That's right. Everybody has their favourite ways of doing things. Yeah, brilliant.
And there's so many different ways to build it.
Yeah, and your point earlier around, you know, the difference between sort of keeping your idea confidential and sharing it. You know, you're the one that has a passion for your idea. Not everybody else has that same passion for whatever it is that you want to create. So totally like that advice. Thank you so much, Kylee. Well, it's been brilliant having you in today and hearing about your experience and what you've achieved. It sounds wonderful. Get on the website. We'll put a link to your product in the notes for those that are interested in your tool. I certainly am. Hopefully I can get a demo out of Kylee soon. But thank you for speaking to us today. It was really great to have you.
Anytime. Thank you. Demos. Anyway, I'll give anyone a demo. Don't you worry. Line up. You're in.
There you go.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for listening today. Do keep in mind that this is a podcast for informational purposes, and all we're really doing is sharing our opinions on things that matter to us. With that being said, if you liked what you heard and want to continue supporting us, share this podcast with your network to help us grow and bring on even more guests. Until next time, this is Ajari from EmpowerTech, signing off.